One for scrawling, one for sniffing. That eases the pain. The pain being the events of today, which I'm going to share with you, so you may learn something, or at the very least you can laugh at me. Yeah. So, we had an attempted break-in at my house. Didn't do very much, just left a couple of crowbar marks on the doors, but it kind of makes you think. The need to reassess security became a little more prevalent after one neighbor had a set of tools nicked, all of his tools nicked out of his van, and the other neighbor, someone decided, oh, let's try and burn down your house for a laugh. Kind of makes you think we should reassess security. So I popped out our locks to have a look, and this is what I found. These are 8 years old and came with the not very cheap Safe Style UK doors that the previous owners of this house bought. And I have to be honest, I was pretty amazed that they're not kite marked. They are Yale, but they're not kite marked. There is no snap protection. There's no obvious anti-drill protection, but pins might be anti-drill pins, you never know. They are a bugger to get through. I was trying one of those last night. I was told to stop waking up the neighbours. And yeah, I thought, well, we need to do something about this because thieves are not going to try picking your locks. And this has pretty good tolerances. I've tried picking it since I've removed it, and it's not breakable. It's got security pins in there, but frankly, snapping is the biggest threat from destructive attacks. They ain't going to try picking it. So, if anyone's wondering, you might have been directed here by the YouTube search algorithm or whatever. Anyone who's familiar with Loxton could probably skip this. This is a half-decent, cheap, off-the-shelf Eurocylinder, the type that's in most stores. If it looks like that, it's Eurocylinder. You should research what the kite mark means, what the 1-star, 3-star thing means, and the different grades of security you can get from these. However, this has a line of snap protection, and it's got some drill resistance in there as well. If you're not sure what snap protection means, these are held in your door upside down, like that, with this wonderful little screw. And what someone can do is grab onto the millimeter or so of protruding Eurocylinder, or even put something in this, drill a screw in there to give them purchase, and they will just rock it up and down, it'll pivot on this, and eventually it snaps, just like that. And they can then just pull this out, and they can access the cam with a screwdriver and just open your door. If you want to check what sort of cylinders you've got in your door, it's quite simple most of the time, except in this situation I'm going to describe to you in a minute. All you do is you open the door, you will see a Phillips screw like that. It shouldn't be in tight. If it looks like someone has had a go at it, then just be a bit cautious. It doesn't need to be in tight. Twiddle that, lefty loosey, righty tighty. You might need to loosen off the handle screws on the inside, just because otherwise they may clamp it in place, and then just bob the key in, and you twiddle the key just to ensure that the cam is not protruding, and then you should be able to just pull this out. It may take a little bit of pushing and pulling if it's been there a while, but you shouldn't have to put too much force in there. If you have to put force into it, loosen off the screws. Anyway, moving on. I was trying to replace these locks, and the first two went very smoothly, to the point where my wife said, well, that was quick, that seemed to be easy. At that point, I claim no responsibility for anything that happened after she jinxed it. Any of this complete fuck-uppery, bumblefuckery, whatever you want to call it, is not my fault. It's entirely her fault. She's the one that jinxed it, okay? Now we've got that out of the way, let me show you how I screwed up so you can perhaps avoid doing so yourself, or you can laugh at me and my pain. So the second set of doors was a set of French doors. It's always going to be awkward when it's French. And you've got handles there. I am not an artist. I failed my school art classes monumentally. But what you do tend to have, and something I am more familiar with, is a master and a slave. Now, the master is the door that you have to open first, and then the slave door, the master will have a multi-point locking system that locks into it, but it won't lock into the door itself. The door often has an extra piece of plastic that is screwed onto it, and on top of that it has a strike plate, which we'll go into in a second. Now, the door is designed with, in my case, 4 screws that allows this plastic, whatever the hell they call it, I'm going to call it a strip, but it's a bit more beefy than that, to be removed, and I'm assuming that'll give you access to the eurocylinder, to the screw to remove the eurocylinder. However, slight problem. These doors have been in place for 8 years, and they have been heated and cooled repeatedly, and the plastic, as you can see by the completely intentional wibbly wobbliness of all of this, the plastic has warped. And this have warped together, as if effectively there were one piece of plastic. And if you remove this entire strip, what will happen is you'll never get it on perfectly. And it does need to be perfect. Never happen. You might be able to put some kind of sealant in there, but what the locksmiths say is if you put that back on, you will end up in a situation where you have ingress, water ingress, and a drafty door, and you won't be able to fix it, not without replacing this entire slave door, because it's gradually warped and changed shape as plastic does. So the other way of doing it, which you may find videos on YouTube about, is this is a view of the inside of that door. So you've got your handles. Oh yeah. Your handles there. You've got your eurocylinder there. Yep. And what you will often have with a multi-point locking system is a strike plate going down here, and you will have places where the bolts from the master door latch into the slave door, and you may have several of them. We had quite a few, and the strike plate went from top to bottom practically, but some have got smaller strike plates. Either way, this was held in place by a lot of screws. And what the locksmith people, who clearly know what they're doing more than I do, suggest you do is you remove the strike plate, and then you work out from a similar eurocylinder where this is going to be. So you measure it up. You can use the existing eurocylinder and a replacement eurocylinder. The measurements should be the same, otherwise it wouldn't be a very good standard now, would it? And then you drill through, and there might be, in my case there were 2 layers of plastic that I had to drill through. In some of the videos you'll find on YouTube, you'll find 1 layer of plastic, and some say you'll hit metal potentially and you should just go through it. Not a fan of that idea, I have to say, but each to their own. So looking at this sort of close up from this angle as a cross section, I had a outer layer of plastic, and what I also had was a position for a bolt to go in there, so I could get sort of down the top there with tools if I wanted. And then I had another layer of plastic. Then there was some kind of metal retaining plate, but most importantly was the eurocylinder with its key at the top. Wonky balls. Anyway, so what I did initially was I drilled a little bit too low. So I drilled through this outer layer of plastic, which was pretty hard actually. And then I carried on drilling. I'm drawing this wonky for a reason, because that's how I did it. And I saw it was quite challenging not to go too far and completely fuckulate the screw. But I saw the screw, and I thought, well, if I carry on at this angle, the screw, I was just off a little bit. If I carry on at this angle through here, I can widen this hole, and then I'll be able to get the screw out, especially if I put a tool down there to hold it and I use a magnet here, because I was feeling clever and cocky. That bit worked really well. I managed to extract the screw, and then I had to widen this whole little bit to get the screw through, because there wasn't enough room to get it up there. I sucked it out with a magnet. Yeah, it's all gone really well. Unfortunately, that was where the good luck ended. So I took the old cylinder out, I put the new cylinder in, and then I tried to get the screw back, well, a screw back up this hole. And as you can imagine, I was going in at that angle in order to screw it in at that angle. And I thought, I've got to be really careful here, because otherwise I could end up cross-threading it somehow or whatever. So it felt good. It felt like it was going in, and then it sort of stopped. Alright, well, what do you do in that situation? You know, it shouldn't give resistance, but it is giving resistance. Well, of course, you screw harder, don't you? That's obviously the solution. And then it stopped, and I thought, well, maybe I'll just try undoing that a little bit. Oh, well, that ain't moving at all. So, bearing in mind that locksmiths on a Sunday afternoon, an emergency locksmith, is going to be very expensive, I thought, well, let's just start playing with things and seeing what happens. So what did I do? I started jiggling the handle, and I started turning the key. At which point, the whole thing jammed up in the unlocked position. So at this point, I have a door I can't secure, and everything is jammed up, and I have no idea what's going on. So I then did the most important thing, was I went and accused the wife and said it was all her fault because she jinxed it, and this was nothing to do with me or my responsibility at all. She wasn't happy with that, but at least it had the bonus of being the truth. I then did what I should have done to start with, which is I opened up this entire section, and then I drilled through and I opened up that entire section, and I also did that. So what I had achieved through the miracle of idiocy was this situation, where the screw had gone in between the cam and the spine of the lock, and then on top of that I twiddled the handle, so this was, it had a little bit of movement, but it was basically stuck in place. I was, up until that point, I thought I might have got it in the hole and somehow cross-threaded it, but that wouldn't have explained why it was all jammed up. So I'd done that. But what I'd also done, and this is taking place on my wall of shame next to the brake pad where I got my money's worth, I'd also completely fucked the head of the fastener. Because why not? Just keep trying. It'll be fine. It won't. So I reached for these things, which worked like a charm. I never used these before, but they got me out of a sticky situation. So after I'd figured out where the problem was, my priority was just get this defuculated, and if necessary I can put the old lock back in if I've screwed up the lock, just undo it. So I released the pressure on that as much as possible. There wasn't much movement, but it was just enough. I used the broken extractor dealer-mabobby, which worked like a charm, and at which point I managed to extract the lock and assessed it for any damage. There wasn't actually too much. It was just some scoring marks. I was quite amazed. And then I put the lock back in. I put the screw in properly this time because I had direct line of sight and a proper path and could see what I was doing. And then tighten up the handles, test it all worked fine. So, what would I have done if I could do this again, which I think is kind of what all this babbling is leading on to. First, if you don't have complete access, just cut a bigger hole. Yeah, this is a section on our door where they've already cut out where the strike plate is going to go. So they've already cut out large sections. This intersection, yeah, there isn't really a hole there, but there is still, it still accesses the outside because there's always a little bit of a gap around the eurocylinder. So it's not a perfect seal. So just cut a big enough hole so you can see what you're doing. The magnet was still a good idea because it stopped the screw bolt thing from fucking off down inside the door. That's always good. Helps secure it. The other thing I wish I'd done before putting the strike plate back on, and I couldn't be asked taking it off again because frankly it's huge, was to seal up with just a little bit of tape these gaps, the holes that I drilled, just to stop the ingress. Or any risk of ingress. I don't think there is much of a risk just because of how the door is built, but I would have ideally done that. And on the outer one, the strike plate would have held it in place, and on the inner one, you probably would have needed to clean up some IPA or something in order to get that right. I hope you've had a good laugh at my expense. Thank the wife, she jinxed the whole thing. And just bear in mind, a 5-minute job is never a 5-minute job. And it will drive you to drink.